everyone! Welcome back to the Spirit of Success. I'm your host, Yara, and on today's episode, we will be discussing careers related to music and professional organization. Joining me today from Beijing, China, I have the pleasure of speaking with beloved and well-known musician, singer, composer, artist, and professional organizer, Mrs. Elika Mahony. Mrs. Mahony has loved music since she was a child. She began studying classic piano at age 5 and began pursuing singing during her college years. Since then, she continues to use her piano skills and voice to create beautiful and inspirational music in different styles, with her most popular style being the pieces and songs she creates inspired by the Baha'i faith and the Baha'i writings, and has released a variety of CDs and albums. In addition to music, she is also an artist who creates prayer beads and book covers, and a professional organizer. Through her calming music and beautifully delicate art, Mrs. Mahony hopes to bring joy and upliftment to people all around the world. Welcome, Mrs. Mahony. How are you today?
I'm really well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, and thank you for being on the show. I'm super excited for our conversation today. So, before we get into the details of your career, we would love to know what got you into music and how did you get your start?
So, for music, my mother is a piano teacher, and my father is a lover of all kinds of music. So, I was exposed to music from a very young age. And I remember I would wake up on weekends growing up with music reverberating throughout the house because my father would be playing either some classical music or some jazz music, and that would wake me up in the mornings. So I was always surrounded. My mother would be playing classical pieces on the piano all the time. And then I started taking piano lessons at a young age. And once I was in college, a couple of friends of mine encouraged me to start composing. And so we would sing together, and we would sing at different Baha'i gatherings. I'm a Baha'i, so there's a wonderful Baha'i community in the university that I went to at UC Davis and UC Berkeley. And we would sing at these different gatherings. And after that, we were encouraged to record these pieces. And this was back in 1997. The three of us, one of my friends is Fiona Duman Rohani, and the other is Michelle Brown Ramirez. The three of us recorded an album called Melodies of the Nightingale. So that's really how it started. There are a few beautiful writings from Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, where he talks about music. For example, he says, "We verily have made music as a ladder for your souls, a means whereby they may be lifted up unto the realm on high." And this particular quote really inspired me. I thought, gosh, music has such a power to elevate and uplift. And I could see it in the gatherings where we would sing for friends, just that it would change the spirit in the room. So I think that really was the start, the beginnings of how it began.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. So, along those lines, what does creativity mean to you?
So creativity is storytelling through the arts. And it's a very mysterious process. And when I read this question that you wanted to ask, I was very excited by this question because I think it means different things to different people. And to me, it means opening myself up to inspiration and letting go of the outcome and any perfectionistic tendencies that come, which want to block the flow of creativity. And I find that those moments of creativity are the moments when I'm in tune or having a connection with the divine. It's a beautiful experience, and I often equate it to, it's like being in a state of prayer, and it's it's bringing forth a sense of joy and elation and calm all at once when you let go completely and you allow yourself to be this empty channel for inspiration to pass through. And one example I can give is when I'm in the studio recording my vocals, it takes some time to be able to remove the thoughts that obstruct that flow of creativity. And I find that when I'm able to reach those moments, those blissful moments of pure connection, my voice, the tone in my voice actually changes because I've removed myself completely and I'm just focusing on the beauty of the words that I'm recording. And there's something very sublime that happens, but that it doesn't come easily. I have to work at it and just stop focusing on the technical aspects or be in my head and really just let go of all the barriers allow that don't allow the beauty of creativity to pass through.
Exactly, how beautifully put. And I definitely resonate with that. I feel like creativity is something that is constantly flowing in us, but it's something that can be obstructed when we like overthink something. Or, for example, like with instruments, with me when I'm playing my instruments and I'm trying to like improvise, if I think about it too much and I think about, well, am I going to put this technique here? Am I going to put this there? You know, does it have, I don't know, when I focus on more of the elements of it rather than just letting it flow, I realize that it's like so much harder for me to be able to come up with something and something that really sticks to my heart and sticks to the heart of those people listening to it. But when I can just sit there and just like clear my mind of all of that and I just play, the things that flow out of like what I'm able to create, I find stick with me so much more and have such more of like a impact on my spirit, I guess, and how I feel. I'm like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And I'm like, I need to write this down, I need to remember it. So I definitely agree. So throughout your musical career, you have made both pop and religiously inspired music. What similarities and differences are there in the music creation process for these different genres?
So most of the music that I create is Baha'i inspired music, which I take the texts of Baha'u'llah, who's the founder of the Baha'i faith, and some sacred texts of Abdul Baha, his son. And I I love to work with these sacred texts because they're very uplifting and they're very meaningful. And so in that context, I have lyrics to work with. So in some ways it's easier, and in some ways it's actually more challenging because you have to make sure that the beauty of the words comes through primarily rather than the music. Um, Both are important, obviously, but it's important to complement the words through the music
Yeah.
and not the other way around. And so that can be tricky at times because of the rhythm of the words. Sometimes there are some long descriptive words, or the sentence is really long, and you have to figure out how to make the rhythm flow, basically. So that is um, one of the projects that I work on are Baha'i inspired projects. I worked on an album called Edge of Forever about 10 years ago, where we wrote our own lyrics, the producer and I, and it was inspired by spiritual themes of love and unity and service. But it had different challenges. Actually, creating our lyrics was very challenging. I didn't realize how difficult it is to to write lyrics that are not so cheesy but are uplifting and that flow, that are memorable. And we also wanted to experiment with different genres of music. So there's a little pop on there. There's some Latin, Middle Eastern. We have the uh, different instrumentation like the oud
Yeah.
instrument and the santur, and we were really experimenting to see what kind of music I enjoyed. Ultimately, after that experience, I realized my greatest love is setting the Baha'i writings to music. It just feels very much like a privilege to do that, and so many people are creating music that, you know, pop or these other different styles. So I felt it was much easier to focus on the Baha'i writings. And then the other genre of music is piano instrumental music. And um, I created one album called Glimmerings, which took about 10 years to create. It was the longest album that I worked on. Um, and I think the reason for that is it's just the piano. And so there's nothing to cover it up. It has to speak for itself. And so I experimented with some spontaneous recordings. And one of the pieces was called Final Journey, was recorded for my mother-in-law the day that she passed away. And I decided in that moment, how could I honor her? And so I decided to sit in my studio and record what came to my heart as I thought of her and her beautiful qualities in her life. So I sat at the piano and I pressed record, and I allowed my fingers to play whatever came to me spontaneously. And it was just the most magical, intense moment to be able to create a melody for her. And obviously, I couldn't play it again later. I had to learn how to play it. Um, so, so that was a very unique style. And since then, I've actually created another couple of pieces for my uncle who passed. And this is actually another beautiful story. Um, on the last few days of my uncle's life, he was hospitalized, and we knew that he wouldn't be here much longer. And so I decided to go to the piano and again try to honor his life in some way. And as I thought of him similarly, I played a piece of music. Later on, I found out that the moment that I was composing this piece for him called A Heavenly Angel, that was the moment that he passed on from this world. And I truly feel that he guided my fingers to create the melody that came. It was a very powerful and moving experience. So each of these different kinds of projects have been meaningful in different ways. And I just thought I'd share those two beautiful and very moving experiences.
Well, thank you for sharing these very touching stories with us, and very touching inspiration for your different pieces. I think when people listen to them, especially knowing these stories behind them, it gives it a different perspective, of one side knowing, how they came to fruition, but also now hearing it with that story and that context in mind, I think gives it a different spirit. And at the same time, it's very interesting hearing, the differences and the similarities in creating these two seemingly very different styles of music. I think when people think of music that is religiously inspired, whether that be Baha'i music or Christian music, or any music from any faith, I think that there's like, mm, preconceived notions of, like, what it's going to sound like or what it's going to be. And I think people also assume that it's going to be very different than what pop music sounds like, or the creation process for the both. Obviously there's differences, and it's cool to hear those differences, being that they're not the things that maybe necessarily we would think would be what are different. But it's also, at the end of the day, I think it's cool hearing the similarities because it's music, and you're creating something from the person of what creativity means to them and how they express creativity. And I think that spirit of creativity is what you're going to see in both types of genres, or however many multitudes of genres that they do. That's really cool to hear about. Um, and Throughout your career in music, and even in the arts, what obstacles, if any, have you encountered, and how have these shaped your approach and experiences?
Yeah, so I think probably the first one that comes to mind is funding my albums is one challenge, as releasing music can be quite expensive and a lot goes into creating albums. And if you want to create quality music, you need to hire a producer and musicians and studio time. And there's so many parts of it which I can share later. And for one of the albums actually um, that I released on the theme of detachment, it's called Infinite Bounty. It actually took 6 years to recoup the costs of that album. That was a day of celebration. So I think that's something that many people don't realize, the amount of resources that go into creating music. So that's one of the challenges. Another one, there was an album that I was releasing a couple of years ago in honor of the bicentenary of the birth of the Bab. And the Bab was the herald of Baha'u'llah. He came before and announced the coming of Baha'u'llah. So I wanted to take that opportunity to create an album for him. And in 2019, so I worked with a producer in Colombia. And the challenge was because there's so many decisions that you have to make on a daily basis. And the moment he would wake up, I would be going to sleep and vice versa. So it was very difficult to find the time to communicate. So, but of course, that's also a gift that we're able to converse now digitally.
Yeah.
That's quite exciting as well. And then the last thing I would say is that there's so many details, what I was just mentioning, in every step of the process.
Yeah.
And it's a difficult process to take an idea for a melody to a completed CD.
Yeah.
So each step has details and requires a tremendous attention to detail. So and there are things that can happen along the way that can be very tricky
Yeah.
for, if the printer makes a mistake at the end and you're on a timeline. Or I actually have a story to share about that. I was releasing an album in honor of the bicentenary of the birth of Baha'u'llah. um, that was in 2017, and a very special year. And I had limited time because I had decided in 6 months that I was going to do this album in honor of Baha'u'llah. And I was already working on one in Chinese. So I thought, how am I going to do this in 6 months? Because it usually takes maybe a year or two, sometimes longer. And I just felt I needed to do this. This is an opportunity I could not pass up. But how am I going to do this? So we were on a timeline. I managed, but in the last month or so, as we were working on the CD duplication, we had found a company in Shanghai, and this company, and I live in Beijing, so it's a different city. This company had sent a sample CD for me to listen to of my music so that I could just make sure it was all okay before we reproduced 2,000 of them.
Yeah.
So it came to me and it was distorted. There were a few songs that had distortion. So we sent it back and we asked them to kindly do it again. The second one came, same issue. Third one came, same issue. And time, we had, I think, a couple of weeks by this time. And it needed to be sent out by a certain date in order, because people had pre-ordered the album. So I
Yeah.
had promised it would be out by a certain date. And so finally this company in Shanghai said, the problem is not on our end, it's on your end. And we're not going to do anything about it. And I knew that the problem was not on our end because I'd worked with professionals and I knew the process. So we decided we needed to find a different way of doing this. So I prayed about it, and some friends found a duplicator within Beijing within one day. And usually it takes a lot of research, a couple of weeks, maybe. So we put in touch with this distributor. And what we found out is once they sent the CDs to us, we realized that if we had used the company in Shanghai,
Mhm.
There was a new policy that had just come out in China where you cannot send more than 5 CDs from one city to another. So
Oh,
if we had used the original company, we would have spent all these funds for CDs that couldn't be shipped, that would have been stuck in Shanghai. We would have had to start from scratch or figure out another way, and we wouldn't have made the deadline. And so, what turned out as a challenge turned out to be a blessing in disguise.
what an
Yeah.
interesting story, and thank you for sharing that with us. And I think, like you mentioned, we're actually about to talk a little bit more in depth about the music creation process. But it's a lot goes into creating music and getting things ready that we don't typically think of when you're just buying an album or you're listening to it on iTunes or something like that. So can you walk us through what your typical music release process looks like?
Sure, sure. So there are many steps, as I mentioned. So first, you would need to come up with a theme and for the project. So, for example, in 2007, I released an album called Fire and Gold on the theme of tests and difficulties. I wanted to find a theme that would be of interest to everyone. We all go through challenges in our daily lives. So I wanted it to be applicable to everyone. And then, so once you find a theme, then the second step would be to find quotes on that theme that resonate with me and that I would think would resonate with my audience. So, and then I try to find quotes that would be more easily set to music. Sometimes I've challenged myself, which has been an interesting experience, but also it's worked out. The third step would be you start to compose the music and rough drafts of the music. Um, you don't always use the rough draft. Sometimes you create a lot more music and choose the best ones. And then the next step would be to record the piano and the vocals and create a demo for the producer so that he has an idea of what the song sounds like and what direction you want to take with it. So it's a rough draft of the song. Then next step would be to record. Um, no, let's see. What would the next step would be to, after you do the recording, then you consult on the arrangement of the song with your producer. So you decide what instrumentation do you want on there, what parts should be shifted. So there's some consultation around that after that. And all of these steps, they take time. So it's not boom, boom, it's happening every day. These steps are not happening day by day. One step may take months. The first one could take months to come up with quotations and start composing. That could take a year or many years, depending on the artist. So after you consult on the arrangement, then you record the final vocals. Well, after the producer has shifted everything around and he'll give you the music to work on, rearranged. You record the vocals, and personally, for me, I often record some of my best vocals the first session in the demo session. So I try to make sure that it's created with a click track, which means with a metronome to make sure that the music is in line in case you want to add other instruments later on. And sometimes, because I'm feeling the spirit of this new piece that's coming to life, there's something very special in that moment that happens to my vocals. So oftentimes, I might use many of those first vocals because it has an emotional connection. Um, so after you record the vocals, then the producer will refine them and listen to them. And then you start thinking about hiring additional musicians. There are many steps. Do you want me to keep going?
Please, please.
There, you hire the different additional musicians and you compose the different instrumental parts. Um, I like to compose like cello parts because I enjoy coming up with those melodies. But then I also like to ask the cellist, for example, to come up with spontaneous cello parts after she's listened to the song a great deal. And, because she's a cellist, I don't play the cello. So oftentimes we use most of her takes because they're really lovely. Um, and also my producer will come up with different instrumental parts for the cellist or other instrumentalists. Then we bring them into the studio, we record them, or they record it in another country and send it to us. So actually I haven't met many of the musicians that I've worked with in
Oh,
different parts of the world, which I hope I get the chance to meet them. But I feel, there's a definite connection and appreciation for their craft. So they do it in a studio where they are, and they send it to the producer, and then the producer edits the parts. He picks the best parts. That can often take some time. And then once you've done all of that, you start to think about the graphics
yeah.
and the design and the packaging of the album. And so I often work with a design company for the cover design, and the artwork is just as important as the music. I think because I'm an artist, I have an appreciation for the beauty of the arts and how I love my music to be given as a gift, and just really appreciated the packaging. So, for example, the cover of two albums that I mentioned earlier. One is called The Ancient Beauty, which is one of the titles of Baha'u'llah, and The Exalted One, which was a title of the Bab, both divine messengers that I mentioned earlier. And the covers for these albums, I wanted them to be really unique and special, and unlike any other album that I have produced. So they were laser cut, gold cut covers, all made out of paper, of the entrance to the shrine of where they are laid to rest
It's
in
absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the albums are the covers of them. I mean, the music is beautiful, of course, but the covers of them, they like catch the eye. You're like, oh my gosh, what is this? And even now that you're saying it, I didn't realize it when I originally looked. But it's beautiful. It's the doors of the gate of the shrine. That is so beautiful. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
no. Yeah, I get goosebumps just thinking about the process of how it came about. Like one of them is the Bab means the gate. His name means the gate because he opened the way for the coming of Baha'u'llah. And so we wanted the album cover to be a gate. So it opens like a gate, and it also fastens and closes. So it was very special. So that also takes time to come up with that concept and to design it. And then the first draft that came back of the gate was so fine we couldn't use it. It was easily, it would come apart really easily. So we had to refine it and thicken those beautiful little layers all over the gate to refine it. So yeah, so that's a very big part of the whole process. And then the next part, well, as I'm designing and doing that whole part, there's the music is still going on. So you're really having to multitask different things that are, it's like a jigsaw puzzle that's coming together. So then the producer starts to mix the songs when you've refined everything and you've chosen the takes that you want, the final takes and the final instrumental parts after long discussions. The producer starts to mix the songs to make sure that the instrumentation is not too loud and covering the voice, or that this instrument isn't overtaking this one, or the background harmonies are not too loud or too soft, or one voice jutting out. They're just, it's phenomenal how many decisions you have to make along the way. So it can be overwhelming sometimes. So I'm very grateful that I get to work with a producer that I can bounce off ideas. And sometimes with other musician friends, I'll send one or two pieces, or my family, and they'll give their input as well. And then the producer after that masters the songs to make sure that they sound good in cars, stereos, computer, headphones,
Mhm.
and that each of the songs are the same loudness, because you don't want to be listening to one song and then the next one is much louder in your ears. So he refines that. And then we're coming to the end of the process where you're launching the album.
Mhm.
And this has many, many steps, which I won't go into, but it's you have to think about how you want it to be heard by your listeners. And this is, as I said, this is the beginning of another whole process. Many musicians stop here, but this is just as important a step as preparing the song and all the steps that I shared. So I often come up with a 3-month plan of how
Wow.
how I'm going to release my music. Right now, I have a 1-month plan of every day what I'm going to do to release my next piece. And then the final step, and I actually wrote down all these steps. So this is number 15.
Wow.
You, in this process of thinking about a plan for release, you need to be making videos, promotional materials, thinking about social media, all the communication that you're having with friends on your music mailing list. So there's a lot of text you need to be writing and creative content that you need to come up with. That's it.
That is so cool to hear the behind, essentially the behind the scenes of what goes into creating music. And I think that's great advice that it really does matter. I think what the appearance of the album is, how it's released, those are all parts of how people perceive the music, how interested they're going to be to listen to it. And then after that, when they listen to the music, when they listen to the album, it all comes together and it's cohesive. It really has such an amazing impact. And going off of that last step that you shared with us of launching it, sharing it with fans, and hearing back. Another important part of being a musician and artist is to engage with fans. Um, so, how does one maintain an audience and engage in uplifting and meaningful ways with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the things that has been very impactful for me is to have a music mailing list where I can be in touch with friends who sign up. Because there's no guarantee that they'll see what I'm posting on social media because of all the algorithms.
Yeah.
So many times, even close friends of mine don't, they won't know what's happening because even though I've posted it on social media. So I encourage friends to join the music mailing list so that they can have direct access. And I think one important part of having a mailing list is I always try to think, what is some content that will uplift my listener? What is, what can I write that will add joy to their day or bring them some kind of inspiration? So I'm constantly thinking of content that might be helpful or useful to friends. And so I try to connect with people on there, and I genuinely care about how friends are doing on my music mailing list. And many times I write to them and they write back. And um, I have found many close friends through my music, actually. So uh, some who I've never met, but there's a connection of love and joy and respect because of the messages that we send back and forth to each other. So there's a beautiful friendship with many friends on there. So,
Yeah.
for example, one of the things that I did, of course, we know because of the pandemic, many people have been sick and suffering. And a year ago, I released the long healing prayer revealed by Baha'u'llah, and I set that to music. And we were able to share that with many who were suffering. So, one of the things I wanted to do in continuation of that, I wanted to do a prayer campaign. So, I wrote to friends on my music mailing list and on social media. And I said, if any of you or your uh, family or friends are suffering or need healing prayers, please let me know. I'd love to have a prayer list and write their names down and say the long healing prayer, which is it's about 10-15 minutes, long. And it has beautiful phrases that repeat. And so I wanted to dedicate each of those paragraphs to someone who was not well. And the outpouring of messages that I received was incredible. The need. And it was such an inspiring experience to, first of all, write down I had 4 sheets of paper with names of friends, some that I'd never met, who were asking for prayers for loved ones or their friends that they had heard that were really suffering. And so that was just one example of connecting and trying to be of service to friends around the world. Yeah.
How touching how it all came together and the engaging with fans. A little bit more into your profession as a professional organizer, which is something very unique. You recently gained your certification in professional organization. We would love to know what got you interested in pursuing it on a professional level, and if you could tell us a little bit about what the certification process involves.
Sure, sure. So I have loved organizing for a long time. I love order and beauty. And in the Baha'i writings, Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, talks about the importance of having an orderly home. So I've been interested in these ideas for a long time. And when I would visit my family, I would be helping my mom organize her kitchen, or one of my siblings, their closet or their toy room. And I could see that it brought them a sense of joy and uh, order. The order that it brings also a sense of relief and takes away anxiety and stress. And I've actually been doing a little bit of research about how our cluttered environment has an influence on our psyche and our ability to focus, on our ability to be productive, and vice versa. If our mind is also chaotic and full of clutter and stress, it influences the environment that we have. So recently I was doing some research, and amazing to read that there's some serious benefits to taking control of clutter, like reduced stress, as I just mentioned, improved sleep, reduced depression and anxiety, greater productivity, and even better relationships, which I was like, wow. I mean, that's phenomenal. Which, if you've seen the Netflix show with KonMari, I think it's called Tidying Up, you see in one of the episodes how a marriage was saved through through her helping them organize their home. So the certification process, I found a course online, and this was during last year during the pandemic when we had a little more time. Although honestly, it was an intense year of productivity. Um, I think musicians all around the world felt a sense of urgency to bring solace to the community. But I had a little bit of time, so I took this course. Um, it was called, I forget, it was some part of some online university, but it was between, I think, about 6 weeks and 2-3 months that you had to take the lessons. And then there was an exam at the end, which I took. And then I was able to be certified. So right now I'm in the process of gaining experience, and I've done different projects, which is also really loved. I had no idea that what comes with organizing and helping others organize, you get to know people on a much deeper level, because they're trusting you in their home and with their valuable um, mementos that they want to show you, the things that are very private and personal to them, and their stories, and so you get to know people on a very deep level, which was a lovely surprise that I didn't really anticipate. So yeah.
Well, how fascinating. And besides like Marie Kondo, I think people don't really, think about the power that organization has. And she definitely brought that more to public attention, I think, of thinking about what the impact the organization has. But I think even in the faith, we have this idea that you have to live in an orderly space. On a personal level, I can say I definitely have experienced many of the things you listed on that benefits list of organization. So there are very serious benefits to organization that whether we realize it or not, or like immediately realize it, they're definitely present. And it's something I think that we all should start taking a bit more into consideration in our lives and start incorporating more, especially during this time in the pandemic. We're spending a lot more time at home and we're spending a lot more time with our families and seeing how organization impacts how we relate with one another, and just keeping our mental health healthy. And for people who are interested in pursuing it on a professional level like yourself and learning more about it, it's something that I don't think people would know where do you access that type of knowledge. But like you shared, it's something that's available at university. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely look more into it because it is available and it's out there. Reaching the big question of the show, what does success mean to you, and how has your definition of success evolved throughout your life and career?
So, success to me is quite simple. It's refining and working on the qualities of God and making sure that my goal every day is to uplift souls and bring my soul and the souls of others closer to their creator. That's it. Um, and I think it's easy as a musician to get caught up with what worldly success means because it's thrown at you every day with advertising and worldly ideals. And honestly, as a inspired musician, I have to work every day to make sure that the message is clear in my mind, that the main goal in life um, is to uplift souls and to bring joy in some way to others. That to me, simply, it's not simple, but it's simply, that is simply what success means. So, yeah, as I said, it's easy to get distracted because of all the messaging that we receive every day. But I think through prayer and meditation, um, it's important to remind ourselves of what really is truly important. Yeah.
Wonderfully put. And now to talk a little bit more specifically about youth, what do you think is the role of youth in service in today's society?
So youth have a high sense of moral justice, and youth are full of energy, they're full of hope, and it's always been the role of youth to renew society. Youth have great potential because they're not entrapped in society's games and systems. So they have the potential to serve with a selfless spirit. And so youth are wired to want to change the world. And we have so many examples in history of how youth have regenerated their community. We've had examples of heroic youth that have uplifted all those around them and have brought about great change, even in present day. So I have great hope for youth. I mean, you look at your own example, dear Yara, of this project that you have created. What a service to the community, to adults and to youth around you, to learn more about these important topics, about what does it mean to be a musician in this day and age? How do we uplift others in meaningful ways through what we do? So you're doing that by creating this wonderful project. So I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you, Yara, for
Oh,
being an inspiration and an example to others.
oh, well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope the audience that listens enjoys and other youth, I really hope that they're able to take away from the show. But I really, really appreciate that and your encouragement. What advice do you have for youth who want to pursue music or organization as careers?
So with music, it takes time to develop an audience that wants to support and listen to your music. It's not an easy profession, I would say. I guess it depends on what kind of music you want to create. The music industry is changing, and there are musicians that are able to be successful at their craft by cultivating a fan base online using social media and ads. And but it's not easy for sure. And anyone who wants to go into music or into the arts needs to be realistic. It's not easy to support a family, and um, it can get to a place where you can get to a place where you can make it sustainable, but it requires a lot of time and patience, commitment. You really need to find what is your micro niche of music. So you need to identify, for example, you can't just say I'm a pop artist, because you will get lost in a pool of musicians that create pop music. So what is the underlying niche within that greater genre of music, so that you can identify what is unique about what you do in the music that you create. So um, but because I mostly make Baha'i inspired music, so the audience is a lot smaller, but I find it extremely fulfilling to be able to create music from the sacred Baha'i writings, but and resources. I've been lucky that I have a group of patrons that support my music, and friends on my music mailing list who purchase my music. I'm feeling very blessed. But I have other projects that I'm doing as well. I have shops, and I have the support of my husband right now, and so I'm blessed that I'm able to do what I do, and I've made it work, thankfully. So that's with music. With organizing, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. You need stamina, you need energy to go through a space and help a client declutter. You need to help them make decisions about belongings. Do they need them? Do they absolutely love them? Do they spark joy for them? So it can be a long and a tedious process depending on how much people accumulate. Um, so I would say with any line of work that you choose, it's going to be 8 to 10 hours a day that you commit to. And you're going to be doing it for many, many years. So find something you love, something you enjoy doing, that brings meaning to your life and to the lives of others. Um, because when you love something that you absolutely love, what you do, it doesn't feel as much like work. Yes, there are moments that it's very challenging and it definitely feels like work. Um, but there are moments of just complete joy and upliftment. And there are days I wake up and I just feel such gratitude that I'm able to do what I absolutely love, and to be able to share it with others and hopefully bring some meaning and upliftment to their lives. It's very moving to to be able to do that. So I hope that youth listening can also find something that delights your heart, that you can offer in some way to your community.
How beautiful, and what great advice, both to specifically music and organization, and even just in general about careers. So I've super enjoyed our time and our conversation, but we're drawing towards the end of the show. But before our episode ends, do you have any additional words of encouragement or advice you'd like to share with our audience?
For sure. I would say choose a line of work that when you look back, when you're in your 70s or you're in your 80s, and you look back on your life and you think of all the facets of your life, your service, your family life, your career, you know that all contributed to the betterment of the world. And that really is the gauge of success and what brings true meaning to our lives. And we know hopefully will bring meaning to the lives of others.
Beautifully put. Thank you very much, Mrs. Manny, for your insight and advice today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. To learn more about Mrs. Manny, to check out her music and work, and to support her music and art, visit her YouTube at Elika Mahony, her Facebook page at Elika Mahony Music, Instagram at Elika Mahony, her website at elikamahony.com, and join her Patreon at Elika Mahony. On her website, you can also find all the places where you can stream her music and buy her albums, as well as the links to her other socials. Mrs. Manny has been working on a lot of upcoming and released projects, including her newest album titled The Divine Mystery, of which she is releasing a new track each month, and a global sing-along, which she released on April 19th, titled Waves of One Sea. Would you like to share more about these projects with us?
Sure. I've had the privilege of working on an album, as you mentioned, The Divine Mystery, which is in honor of Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah. This year is a very special year because it's the centenary of his passing. And so as I release a song a month, I hope that we can ponder more deeply about the life and example of Abdul Baha. I'm hoping that the music, which I have used his words, different passages that he wrote, or different prayers, that they will be of inspiration and upliftment to others. So, and the one special song, "Waves of One Sea," was a collaboration of 240 participants from 44 countries and regions. So I'm so excited to be able to include that. And that song includes 6 different languages within it.
Wow.
So there's a chorus of singers from all around the world, and then there are 5 of us singing 6 languages. And so the video was kindly made by my dear friend Ali Yousefi. So I'm very grateful that this project is a way of sharing the beautiful writings of Abdul Baha and hopefully bringing more meaning to our lives this year.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us and a ton of exciting projects. So be sure to stay tuned and check the description to find out where you can access all of these. And we will be sharing them on the Spirit of Success. So definitely follow us on our platforms to stay tuned with all of that. But for now, from her new album, here is Blessings Upon You. Hope you enjoy.
At all times do I speak of you and call you to mind. I pray unto the Lord, and with tears I implore Him to rain down all these blessings, to rain down all these blessings, to rain down all these blessings, to rain down all these blessings upon you. heavenly delight down all these blessings, and grant you exceeding joy and heavenly delight down all these blessings. At all times do I speak of you and call you to mind. I pray unto the Lord, and with tears I implore Him to rain down all these blessings, to rain down all these blessings, to rain down all these blessings, to rain down all these blessings upon you. At all times do I speak of you. And grant you exceeding joy and heavenly delight down all these blessings, and grant you exceeding joy and heavenly delight down all these blessings. At all times do I speak of.
What a beautiful video. Definitely be sure to check them out. Well, thank you again for your time today, Mrs. Mahony. And as always, thank you all for listening. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and like the podcast on its various platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast, to be notified each time a new episode is posted. If you want to get the latest updates about the show, announcements, submit questions that you would like me to consider to talk about on the show, or join discussions related to the topics we discuss on the show, follow us on Instagram at spiritofsuccess, Facebook at spiritofsuccess9, and our Facebook group under the Spirit of Success. Until next time, I'm your host, Yara, and don't forget to continue challenging yourself and working to make your spirit soar to new heights. Bye!
Thanks, Yara.